The man who loved too perfectly? I thought I had found the kind of love people write songs about, the kind that feels like a safe harbor in a relentless storm. Until the day I reached for a breath mint in my husband's glove compartment and found a photograph of a woman and a little girl, both beaming with smiles I had never seen, but with his eyes staring back at me. That was the moment, my perfect world. The one he had so carefully constructed for us, shattered into a million jagged pieces. It all started 2 years ago on a rain-soaked Tuesday in October. I was leaving the library, my arms overloaded with architectural history books, struggling to open my umbrella. The wind caught it, flipping it inside out in a single, brutal gust. I stood there on the steps, getting drenched, feeling a wave of frustration so profound I almost sat down and cried. And then, a voice, calm and deep, cut through the sound of the pouring rain. "It looks like you're losing that battle." I turned to see a man standing under a large black umbrella, a faint, sympathetic smile on his lips. He was handsome, but not in a loud, obvious way. It was a quiet, dependable kind of handsome. Sharp jawline, kind eyes, a warmth in his gaze that immediately put me at ease. "That's one way to put it," I sighed, finally letting the broken umbrella droop to my side. "Here," he said, stepping forward and extending his own umbrella over both of us. "Let me walk you to your car. It's the least I can do for a fellow book lover." That was Mark. Chivalrous, thoughtful, instantly attentive. He walked me to my car, his shoulder getting damp from leaning down to shield me. He didn't ask for my number, he didn't make a cheesy line, he simply said, "I hope the rest of your day is drier," and turned to leave. But I called after him, my voice a little too eager. "Wait, how can I return your umbrella?" He paused, looked back at me, and that small smile returned. "How about you let me buy you a coffee tomorrow? You can give it back to me then. No rain required." Our first date was at a small, dimly lit coffee shop that smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. We talked for 3 hours, and it felt like 3 minutes. He was an architectural consultant, which felt like kismet given my own work as a historical preservationist. He asked thoughtful questions, he listened, really listened, to my answers. He told me about his life, his dreams of starting his own firm, his love for old buildings and their stories. He seemed so grounded, so real. There were no games, no mixed signals. He texted me the next day, and the day after that. He remembered little things I mentioned, like my favorite flower being peonies and my irrational fear of porcelain dolls. A week after our first date, a beautiful bouquet of pink peonies arrived at my office with a simple note. "Thinking of you, Mark." My friends were envious. My mother, after meeting him once, declared him a keeper. He was everything I had ever wanted. He was my shelter. 4 months into our whirlwind romance, he took me to a secluded cabin for a weekend. There was a roaring fire, a bottle of red wine, and snow falling gently outside the window. He held my hands, looked into my eyes, and told me he had never felt this way about anyone. He said I made him feel whole, that he could finally see a future he truly wanted. He asked me to move in with him. I, of course, said yes without a second thought. Living with Mark was, for the first year, a dream. He was meticulous, orderly, but in a way that felt comforting, not controlling. He had a place for everything. His side of the closet was immaculate, his shoes lined up with military precision. He was a fantastic cook, always preparing these elaborate, healthy meals. He would leave little sticky notes for me on the mirror. "Have a beautiful day, my love." He was the perfect partner. But perfection, I've learned, is often just a very convincing mask. The first crack, so small I almost missed it, appeared about a year ago. We were curled up on the sofa, watching a movie, when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced at it, and his entire body went still for a fraction of a second. It was a subtle shift, but I felt it. The relaxed arm around my shoulders tensed. He casually reached over, picked up the phone, and silenced it without even looking at the screen. "Work," he said before I could even ask. "It can wait." I didn't think much of it then. He was a busy man. But then it happened again, and again. Always at night, usually between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. A single buzz, a swift, almost furtive movement to check and dismiss it. He never took these calls in front of me. He'd always say it was a demanding client or his partner from the firm, a man named David whom I had never actually met. I remember one night, his phone buzzed while he was in the shower. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, lighting up with a notification. I didn't touch it. I wasn't that person, but I saw the preview on the lock screen. It wasn't from a contact name, it was just a phone number. The message preview read, "Can we please talk about?" The rest was cut off. When he got out of the shower, I mentioned it lightly. "Your phone buzzed. Looked like someone really wants to talk to you." He dried his hair with a towel, not meeting my eyes. "It's just David. He's panicking about the Anderson project. I'll call him back later from the office." He said it so smoothly, so believably. But a tiny, cold seed of doubt had been planted in my mind. Then there was the closet. The locked closet in his home office. Our home office, though I mainly used it for reading as my own workspace was in the sunroom. It was a small, narrow door, always locked. He told me when I moved in that it was where he kept sensitive client documents and old blueprints. "It's a mess in there, and most of it is confidential," he had said with a dismissive wave. "Boring work stuff, you're not missing anything." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my loving, trustworthy Mark. But one Saturday, I was vacuuming the office and my hip accidentally bumped against the closet door. It didn't just rattle, it made a different sound. A hollow sound, not like a closet packed with rolled up tubes of paper and files. It sounded empty. I knelt down and peered through the keyhole. I couldn't see anything but darkness. But I saw something else. A single, faint shimmer of light on the floorboards deep inside. It was the reflection off a piece of glass, or maybe a picture frame. Why would a closet full of boring blueprints have a picture frame on the floor? I shook my head, chastising myself for my suspicion. This was Mark. My Mark. The man who brought me tea in bed and massaged my feet after a long day. I was inventing problems where none existed. I was being paranoid. The final red flag, the one I couldn't rationalize away, happened on a Tuesday evening. He told me he had a last-minute meeting with a potential investor, a guy who was only in town for one night. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, and said he wouldn't be late. But he was. He came home at midnight, smelling not of cigar smoke and expensive whiskey, but of soap, like he had just showered. And there, on the collar of his crisp white shirt, was a tiny, almost invisible smudge of pink lipstick. It wasn't my shade. I confronted him, my voice trembling. He looked tired. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a long sigh. "Lena, the meeting was a disaster." The guy was a no-show. I waited at the bar for an hour and a half. Then I just went for a walk to clear my head. I must have brushed against someone in a crowded elevator on my way out of the office earlier. "I'm sorry, my love. I should have called." He pulled me into a hug, his body warm and familiar. "You have nothing to worry about. You are my everything." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. So I did. I buried the doubt, the lipstick, the late-night texts, the hollow-sounding closet. I convinced myself that my own insecurities were the real enemy, not my seemingly perfect husband. That was until the following weekend when my car was in the shop and I needed to run to the pharmacy. He handed me his keys. "Take my car," he said, smiling. "The glove compartment has my insurance card if you need it." And that's how I found myself sitting in the driver's seat of his spotlessly clean Audi, reaching for a breath mint. My fingers brushed against the cold, smooth surface of a photograph. I pulled it out. It was a 4x6 print, slightly worn at the edges, as if it had been handled many times. It showed a beautiful woman with long, dark hair and a wide, joyful smile, holding a little girl of about 3 or 4 on her hip. The little girl was laughing, her head thrown back, her tiny hands clasped around the woman's neck. And she had his eyes. There was no mistaking it. They were Mark's warm, kind eyes. I stared at the photo, my blood running cold. The world outside the car window seemed to slow down, the sounds of the city fading into a dull roar in my ears. Who were they? Why did he have this? My mind raced, scrambling for a logical explanation. A niece I didn't know about? A friend's child? But why keep a single, well-handled photo hidden in his glove compartment? Why hide it at all? I turned the photo over. On the back, in a familiar, neat handwriting that I knew so well, was written an address. An address I didn't recognize, and a time, Saturdays, 10 a.m. And below that, a single, devastating word, a name, Clara. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the photograph trembling in my hand. The man I loved, the man I shared a home and a life with, had a secret. And this photograph, this woman, this child, were at the very center of it. The perfect facade had finally cracked, and I was about to fall into the terrifying darkness that lay behind it. The whispering phone. I sat in the driver's seat of his car, the cold leather of the seat seeping through my jeans, but I felt nothing. The world outside had dissolved into a blur of meaningless color and motion. All that existed was the photograph in my hand, the smiling woman, the laughing child, and my husband's handwriting spelling out a secret life. Clara. The name echoed in my mind, a single, sharp note of betrayal. My first instinct was panic, a raw, animalistic urge to confront him, to scream and cry and demand answers. But a colder, more calculating voice, one I didn't even know lived inside me, whispered to wait. If I confronted him now, he would have a story. He was always so good with stories. He would say Clara was an old client, the child was his goddaughter, the address was a project site. He would look at me with those wounded, sincere eyes and make me feel guilty for ever doubting him. He would make the evidence in my hand feel flimsy and insane. I couldn't give him that chance. I had to know more. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the photograph. Then I carefully placed the original back exactly where I found it, tucked behind the insurance card, its edges aligned with the corner of the compartment. I closed the glove box, the soft click sounding like a gunshot in the silence of the car. I never made it to the pharmacy. I drove home, my body on autopilot, my mind racing 1,000 miles an hour. When I walked through the door, Mark was in the kitchen, humming while he chopped vegetables for dinner. He looked so normal, so domestic. My husband. The stranger? "Everything okay, sweetheart?" he asked, glancing up with a smile. "You look pale." "Just a headache," I managed to say, my voice strangely tight. "I think I'll lie down for a bit." I retreated to the bedroom, closing the door and leaning against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled out my phone and looked at the picture I had taken. I zoomed in on the woman's face. She was beautiful, with a warmth in her expression that seemed genuine. The little girl was her miniature, same dark hair, same smile. And his eyes. Always his eyes. I opened a Maps app and typed in the address written on the back. It was an apartment building, a nice one, in a neighborhood across town, about a 30-minute drive away without traffic. Saturdays, 10 a.m. What happened at 10 a.m. on Saturdays? A routine visit? A standing appointment? A part of his life that was so regimented it had its own scheduled time slot. The next few days were a special kind of torture. I moved through my life like a ghost, smiling at Mark, talking about my day, all while the image of that photograph was burned onto the back of my eyelids. I watched him with a new, hyper-vigilant intensity. I noted the exact time his phone buzzed with those silent notifications. I saw the way he sometimes drifted off in the middle of a conversation, a faint, faraway look in his eyes that I now recognized wasn't about work. He was thinking of them. He was thinking of her. The locked closet in the office became an obsession. The hollow sound, the glimpse of a picture frame. I had to know what was in there. The opportunity came on Thursday night. Mark announced he had a client dinner, an event I was usually invited to, but he said this one was strictly business, just the guys. He gave me a kiss, longer than usual, and told me he loved me. The words felt like ashes in my ears. The moment the door closed behind him, I sprang into action. I went to his toolbox in the hallway closet and found a small set of lockpicks he used for the antique desks he sometimes restored. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the thin metal tools. I knelt before the closet door, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. It took me 20 minutes of fumbling, my ears straining for the sound of his car returning before I heard the final, satisfying click. The lock gave way. I turned the knob and slowly pushed the door open. The closet was not, as he had said, a mess of blueprints. It was almost empty. And it was not a closet, it was a shrine. On the far wall, hanging perfectly level, was a large, framed photograph of the woman from the car, Clara. It was a professional portrait, her smiling softly, her hair flowing over her shoulders. On a small, polished shelf below it sat a single, tiny pink child's shoe, a ballet flat. Next to it was a framed crayon drawing, a stick figure family of 3 holding hands under a lopsided sun. The man had dark hair. The woman had long hair. The little girl was in the middle. The word "Daddy" was scrawled in clumsy letters next to the man. I felt the air leave my lungs. I reached out a hand to steady myself against the doorframe. Daddy. The word was a physical blow. This was more than an affair. This was a child. His child. My eyes scanned the rest of the space. A small box contained hospital bracelets, one for baby girl Mitchell and one for Clara Roberts. The date was from over 4 years ago, before I had even met him. On the floor, leaned against the wall, were a few rolled up posters. With trembling hands, I unrolled one. It was a handmade sign. "Welcome home, Daddy," it read, covered in glitter and heart stickers. I unrolled another. It was a real estate listing flyer for an apartment. The address matched the one from the photograph. Apartment 7B. The listing agent was a name I didn't recognize, but the sale price and date were circled in red pen. He hadn't just been visiting them, he had bought them a home. I stumbled back from the closet, my mind reeling. The lies were so much bigger, so much more profound than I had ever imagined. This wasn't a recent fling. This was a parallel life, one that had been running concurrently with ours for years. He had a daughter, a 4-year-old daughter. The man I loved, the man I slept beside every night, was a father, and I was the other woman in my own marriage. I had to get out of there. I couldn't breathe. I fled the apartment, grabbing my keys and phone, and drove aimlessly for an hour, tears streaming down my face, my vision so blurred I was a danger to myself and everyone on the road. I finally pulled over in a deserted grocery store parking lot and just sobbed, the steering wheel cold against my forehead. When I returned home, much later, the house was dark. Mark was asleep in our bed. I stood in the doorway, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. How could someone harbor such a massive secret and still look so at peace? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room in the dark and I planned. I couldn't confront him without undeniable proof. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to see apartment 7B. Saturday was 2 days away. Saturday at 10 a.m. I would be there. The next day, Friday, was a performance of normalcy that deserved an award. I made pancakes. I laughed at his jokes. I felt like I was watching myself from a great distance, a puppet master manipulating a shell of a person. He was attentive, sweet, completely oblivious to the earthquake that had shattered my world. He left for work at 8 a.m., giving me a lingering kiss at the door. "I love you, Lena," he said, his eyes searching my face. "You know that, right?" "I know," I whispered, the lie tasting like poison on my tongue. The moment he was gone, I called in sick to work. Then I drove to the address from the photograph. The apartment building was modern, sleek, with a secure lobby. I sat in my car across the street watching the entrance. I didn't know what I was looking for. Just a glimpse, just something to make it real. At 8:45 a.m., I saw her. Clara. She emerged from the building, holding the little girl's hand. My heart stopped. She was even more beautiful in person, dressed in a simple yoga outfit, her dark hair in a ponytail. The little girl, whose name I still didn't know, was skipping beside her, wearing a tiny backpack. They looked happy, normal. They got into a small, practical sedan parked in a residence spot and drove away. I sat there, frozen, for a long time. This was real. She was real. The child was real. The life he had built with her was real. I had to know what happened at 10 a.m. on Saturdays. I went back the next morning, Saturday, parking in a different, more concealed spot down the street. At 9:58 a.m., a familiar black Audi pulled into the parking lot. My husband's car. He parked in a visitor spot, got out, and straightened his jacket. He was carrying a small, gift-wrapped box and a paper bag from a popular bakery downtown. He looked excited. He walked to the entrance, pressed a buzzer, and was let in. I watched, my hand pressed to my mouth, as he disappeared into the building. He was going to apartment 7B. He was going to his other family. I waited. I don't know how long I sat there, numb and cold. An hour? 2 hours? At 12:17 p.m., he emerged from the building. He was alone now. No gift box, no bakery bag. He was smiling. A relaxed, contented smile I knew well. It was the smile he had after a perfect Sunday with me. He got into his car and drove away, back to our home, back to his life with me. I started my car, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I didn't follow him. I didn't go home. I drove to a quiet park and sat on a bench watching families play. The confrontation was inevitable now, but I couldn't do it empty-handed. I needed his phone, the whispering, buzzing, lying phone. That was the key to everything. I had to know what it was telling him, and more importantly, what it was telling her. I had to get my hands on it just once, the perfect opportunity I knew would be that night. He always fell into a deep, untroubled sleep exactly 1 hour after he got into bed, a sleep so heavy a bomb could go off and he wouldn't stir. Tonight, I would be waiting. The phone would finally tell me all its secrets, the key that unlocked everything. He came home that Saturday evening smelling of fresh air and barbecue, a scent that felt so normal, so brutally ordinary. He kissed my cheek, his lips warm and familiar, and told me he'd spent the day golfing with David and some clients. He described the 18th hole in vivid detail, the lie coming so easily, so smoothly, it was a work of art. I watched his face, the easy smile, the relaxed set of his shoulders, and I felt a cold, hard stone settle in my stomach. This was the man I loved. This was the consummate actor. I played my part, I asked about his game, I laughed in the right places, I made his favorite pasta for dinner, and we ate at our usual spots at the table. The domesticity of it all was a grotesque parody. Every clink of a fork, every sip of wine was underscored by the screaming truth in my head. He has a daughter, he bought them an apartment. He was there this morning. He was holding her. He was being a father. After dinner, he stretched and announced he was exhausted from all the fresh air. "I think I'll turn in early," he said, yawning, a perfect convincing performance. "Coming to bed soon, my love?" "I'll be there in a bit," I said, forcing a soft smile. "Just want to finish this chapter." I held up a book I hadn't read a single word of. He nodded, gave me one more kiss, and disappeared into our bedroom. I waited. I sat on the sofa in the silent living room, the only light coming from the street lamp outside, and I listened. I heard the water run in the bathroom sink, the creak of the bed as he climbed in, the rustle of sheets. Then, nothing. I watched the clock on the wall, its slow, ticking sweep of the second hand, a torture device. 1 minute, 5, 10, 20. I needed to be sure he was deeply under. When 30 minutes had passed, I stood up, my joints stiff with tension. I moved through the dark apartment like a ghost, my bare feet making no sound on the cool hardwood. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar. I peered inside. He was on his back, one arm thrown over his head, his breathing deep and even. The sleep of the guilt-free, or the utterly deceitful. His phone was on his nightstand, its dark screen facing up. My target. I slipped into the room, my eyes fixed on his face. He didn't stir. I moved with agonizing slowness, each step a deliberate, controlled motion. The air felt thick, resistant. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, a frantic drumbeat that seemed loud enough to wake him. Finally, I was beside the bed. I stood over him for a moment, watching the steady rhythm of his chest. I felt a bizarre, conflicting surge of emotion. A lingering tenderness for this man warring with a boiling, furious betrayal. I leaned over, my shadow falling across him. My fingers hovered just inches from the cool, hard surface of the phone. I picked it up, cradling it in my palm. It felt heavy, laden with secrets. I retreated from the room, step by careful step, not breathing until I was back in the living room with the door pulled shut. I sank onto the sofa, the phone glowing in the dark like a malevolent talisman. Now, the password? He was security conscious, but he was also a creature of habit. I tried my birthday. Incorrect. I tried the date of our anniversary. Incorrect. My heart sank. Then I remembered the real estate flyer in the closet, the date of the sale of apartment 7B. I typed in the numbers, my fingers clumsy with hope and dread. The phone unlocked. The home screen glowed to life, a picture of us from a hiking trip last summer, both of us smiling, dappled in sunlight. The irony was a physical pain. I went straight to his messages. I scrolled past threads with his mom, his supposed partner David, a few other names I recognized. And then I found it. Not saved under a name, just a phone number with a heart emoji next to it. The last message was from today, sent at 12:05 p.m., just before he left her. Her, thank you for today. She hasn't stopped talking about the doll. You made her whole week. We both miss you already. Him, I miss you both more. Tell my princess I'll see her soon. I love you. I stared at the words until they blurred. I love you. He told her he loved her. I started scrolling up, my thumb moving mechanically, dragging me deeper and deeper into the detailed architecture of his double life. The messages went back years. Before me. Through our entire relationship, our engagement, our wedding, they were a continuous, intimate thread of a life lived fully alongside ours. Pictures of the little girl, whose name was Chloe. Look at this drawing Clara sent. She said it's of our family at the zoo. She's so smart. Videos of Chloe taking her first steps, sent to him while he was sitting next to me on this very sofa, telling me he was watching a work tutorial. updates from her doctor's appointments. She's in the 75th percentile for height, just like her dad. Plans for their weekends. Can you get here by 10? I'm making pancakes. I love you. I love you more. On the day of our wedding, he had texted her, him, stuck with this tedious client event all weekend. It's going to be a nightmare. Thinking of you and Chloe the whole time. I'll call you when I can sneak away. I love you. I remembered that day. I remembered him holding my hands, looking into my eyes, and telling me I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I remembered the sincerity in his voice. It was all a lie. Every sacred memory was now polluted, tarnished with this second, hidden narrative. I felt physically sick, my stomach churning. I opened his photos. There was a hidden album locked. I typed in the same password, the date of their apartment purchase. It opened. It was filled with hundreds of pictures. Him holding a newborn Chloe in the hospital, tears in his eyes. Him reading her a bedtime story in a pink, frilly room I had never seen. Him and Clara wrapped around each other on a beach at sunset. Family photos. A perfect, complete family. I scrolled to a picture from 2 months ago. It was a selfie of the three of them crammed together on a sofa, laughing. In the background, on a bookshelf, I saw a familiar handmade sign. "Welcome home, Daddy." It was the same one I had found rolled up in the closet. He hadn't just kept a shrine in there. He had taken a piece of their home and hidden it in ours. I went to his banking app. He used the same password for everything. I opened it, my heart in my throat. I navigated to the transactions. There it was, a recurring monthly transfer to an account under the name Clara Roberts, $2,000. For the last 4 years, it was labeled Investment Property 7B Maintenance. But there were other transactions, large payments to a pediatrician's office, a furniture store, a toy store, a payment for a family membership to the zoo. I opened his email. Flight confirmations for a business trip to Hawaii last year. 1 ticket for Mark Mitchell, 1 ticket for Clara Roberts, 1 ticket for a child. The trip coincided with a week he had told me he was at a grueling industry conference in Denver. I had sent him sympathetic texts telling him I missed him. He had written back, "I miss you too, my love. It's so boring here. I'd rather be anywhere with you." I put the phone down. I had seen enough. More than enough. The evidence was a tidal wave crushing me, suffocating me. He hadn't just had an affair, he had a whole other wife, a whole other daughter, a whole other life that was, in many ways, more real, more established than the one he had with me. I was the side piece. I was the other woman in my own marriage. The betrayal was so complete, so panoramic, it was almost impressive. I sat there in the dark for a long time, the phone on the cushion beside me, its screen now dark. The rage came then, a hot cleansing fire that burned away the shock and the grief. It coursed through my veins, giving me a terrifying, crystal clear focus. I would not cry. I would not scream. Not yet. I carefully got up, went back into the bedroom, and placed his phone back on the nightstand in the exact position and orientation I had found it. He didn't move. I stood there, looking down at the man I thought I knew. The man who had built a fortress of lies around me and called it a home. The confrontation was no longer a question of if, but when and how. And I knew, with a cold, certain fury, that I would not be the one to leave our home. He would. But first, he would look me in the eye and tell me the truth. All of it. I would make him say it out loud. I went into the guest room and closed the door. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, planning my words, visualizing the moment. The dawn was beginning to break, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, when I finally decided it would be tomorrow, Sunday. Pancakes and betrayal. It felt fitting. The woman in the window. The Sunday morning sun streamed into the kitchen, too cheerful, too bright for the funeral of my marriage that was about to take place. I stood at the counter, measuring flour and cracking eggs, my movements robotic. The scent of brewing coffee and sizzling bacon usually felt like comfort, like home. Today, it felt like a scene from a play I was about to break. Mark wandered in, yawning, dressed in his weekend sweatpants. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and nuzzling my neck. "Smells amazing, sweetheart." I didn't lean back into him. I stood rigid, my hands stilling on the bowl of pancake batter. He felt the change in me and loosened his grip. "You okay?" he asked, his voice laced with a casual concern that made my skin crawl. I turned around slowly, wiping my hands on a towel. I looked him directly in the eyes I loved, the eyes that had lied to me every day for 2 years. "We need to talk, Mark." He smiled, a confused, charming smile. Okay? About what? Did I forget to take the trash out or something? Sit down, I said, my voice low and steady, a stark contrast to the earthquake inside me. The smile faded from his face. He pulled out a chair and sat, his expression now wary. I remained standing, leaning against the counter, putting the physical distance between us that I so desperately needed. I know, Mark, he blinked. You know what? I know about Clara. The name hung in the air between us, sharp and final. His face went pale. The color drained from it so completely I thought he might pass out. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He was scrambling, his mind racing to find a foothold, a story, an excuse. Lena, I don't. Who is Clara? He stammered. Stop, I said, my voice cutting through his panic. Just stop. I know about Clara Roberts. I know about your daughter, Chloe. I know about apartment 7B. I know about the monthly payments, the family trips, the hidden closet. I know everything. I listed the facts calmly, dispassionately, like a detective reading a charge sheet. Each item was another nail in the coffin of our life together. His shoulders slumped. The fight, the pretense, went out of him all at once. He looked down at his hands, clenched on the table. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. It was the sound of a world collapsing. How long? I asked, the first crack of emotion breaking through my controlled tone. How long, Mark? He didn't look up. 4 years, he whispered. I met her a year before I met you. The confirmation from his own lips was a physical wound. I had known, but hearing him say it was different, it made it real in a new, more terrible way. So, our entire relationship, I said, my voice trembling now, our entire marriage has been a lie. You were building a life with me while you were already living one with her. It's not that simple, he said, finally looking up, his eyes pleading. It is. I slammed my hand on the counter, making the bowls jump. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. It is that simple. You have a wife and a child. What am I? Your weekend project? Your convenient downtown apartment? You don't understand, he said, his voice rising in desperation. Clara, she was my first. We were young. She got pregnant. I did the right thing. I supported them, but it was never like what we have, Lena. It was obligation. What I have with you is real. This is the life I chose. I stared at him, stunned by the sheer magnitude of his selfishness. Obligation? You call a child obligation? You call buying them an apartment, texting them you love them every day, taking them on family vacations, obligation? You have a whole family, Mark. You don't get to have two. I love you, he cried, standing up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I love you, and I love her in a different way. I never meant to hurt you. I was going to tell you. When? I screamed, the rage finally breaking free. When were you going to tell me? After 5 years? 10? When Chloe graduated high school? Were you just going to split your time between your two families forever? He had no answer. He just stood there, exposed, the architect of this ruin. I saw the pictures, I said, my voice dropping to a venomous whisper. The three of you on the sofa. The welcome home, daddy sign. You have a whole life, Mark. A life you actively participate in. You are not a passive bystander. You are her father. You are her partner. And you are my husband. You can't be all three. I walked to the kitchen table and picked up my printed copy of the bank statement, the one with the monthly transfer to Clara Roberts. I threw it on the table in front of him. Get out. He looked stunned. What? Get out of my house, now. Lena, please, we can talk about this. We can fix this. There is nothing to fix, I yelled. There is nothing to fix, I yelled. There is no we's anymore. There is only you and the mess you made. Get your things and get out. Go to your other home. Go to apartment 7B. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there. I went into the bedroom and started pulling his suits from the closet, throwing them onto the bed. He followed me, hovering in the doorway. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice small. I don't care, I said without looking at him. To her. To a hotel. I don't care. You are not sleeping under this roof tonight. It took him 2 hours to pack his essentials. The silence in the apartment was deafening. I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, listening to the sounds of him dismantling the life we had built. When he was finished, he stood by the front door with a suitcase and a duffel bag. He looked broken. Lena, "I am so sorry," he said, his voice thick with tears. I didn't respond. I just looked at him, memorizing the face of the stranger I had married. He opened the door and left. The click of the lock was the most definitive sound I had ever heard. The moment he was gone, the strength left my body. I slid to the floor, wrapped my arms around my knees, and sobbed. I cried for the man I thought he was. I cried for the future I thought we had. I cried for the betrayal that was so vast I couldn't even see its edges. Days turned into weeks. The divorce papers were drawn up and served. He fought it at first, begging for another chance, but I was immovable. The truth was my armor. My friends and family were shocked, a whirlwind of support and outrage that I let wash over me. I moved through the necessary motions like an automaton. About a month after he left, I found myself driving. I didn't plan the route, but my hands on the wheel seemed to know where to go. I ended up parked across the street from that modern, sleek apartment building, apartment 7B. I don't know what I was looking for. Closure, maybe? Or just a final, painful confirmation to cauterize the wound. I saw her first, Clara. She was taking out the trash, a simple domestic chore. She looked tired but content. Then the door opened again, and Mark came out. He was holding Chloe's hand. He was wearing casual clothes I didn't recognize, his hair slightly messy. He looked comfortable. He belonged there. He picked up Chloe, swinging her onto his shoulders, and she squealed with laughter. Clara looked up at them and smiled, a real, effortless smile. And in that moment, I saw it. I wasn't just the other woman. I was the outsider. This was his real life. The life of obligation, as he had called it, looked an awful lot like a happy, settled family. The life he had with me, the perfect, curated, passionate life, had been the escape, the fantasy. I was the secret. He had been playing house with me, but he lived here, with them. I started the car and drove away. I didn't look back. The healing was slow. It was agonizing. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days the anger felt like it would consume me. But slowly, piece by broken piece, I started to rebuild. I sold the apartment we shared. I moved to a new neighborhood, one with no memories of him. I focused on my work, on my friends, on rediscovering who I was before I became Mark's wife. The love I had for him didn't vanish overnight. It curdled, transformed into a grief for what I had believed in. And then, one day, the grief was quieter. The lesson wasn't just about trust, it was about perception. Love isn't always what it seems. Sometimes, the most perfect love is just the most perfect performance. The man who seems to love you too perfectly might just be practicing a part he's played before. He wasn't a monster, he was a coward. A coward who loved two women and two lives so much that he was willing to betray them both rather than choose. And in the end, his inability to choose became the choice that broke everything. The mask of perfection is the most dangerous one of all, because you never even think to look for the lies underneath. You think you're safe, you think you're loved, until you find the key that unlocks everything and discover the beautiful, painful, unbearable truth.